Central Library of the Kansas City, Missouri Library System, which is one of the jewels of Kansas City. You know, it's ranked as one of the top library systems in the whole country, so we're very fortunate to have it. My name is Linda Rodriguez. I'm the president of Border Crimes, the local chapter of Sisters in Crime. And this event, as well as one last night, is a part of the celebration of the 5th anniversary of Border Crimes, which is our local, it's called Border Crimes because, of course, we've got the Kansas-Missouri border there. So, to begin with, I would like to thank a few people, especially our co-sponsors. The Bernard and Haskell Lecture Fund of UMKC has helped to co-sponsor Hank's visit, and that makes it an official Bernard and Haskell lecture, which is very prestigious to a class of communications majors, actually several classes altogether, and was fabulous. Bookmark Press at UMKC is a co-sponsor, as is National Sisters in Crime, Mysteryscape, and the library here. So we want to thank all of them. Now, in putting together this visit and these celebrations, it just would not have been possible without certain people. First of all, Anne Friedman. Anne, would you stand up? Next, Carolyn Collins. Is Carolyn here yet? Maybe she's coming from further away. And the rest of our committee. Julie Tollefson, just stand and remain standing till we're finished. Julie Tollefson, Sarah Henning, Frank Cook, Patty Flood, Lisa Harkrader, Warren Bull, Gail Reese, who can't be here tonight, Kristen Devens, Gwen Irvin, Robin Morlock, Nancy Picard, Betty Furnish, and Sherry LeBlanc, who's out of the Mysteryscape table. Give all these people a 26 years ago in Lawrence, Kansas, Nancy Picard, Sarah Paretsky, Sue Grafton, and a number of other women mystery writers founded Sisters in Crime, a national organization to promote the professional development and advancement of women crime writers to achieve equality in the industry. Nancy Picard was the second National Sisters in Crime president. 20 years later, Nancy decided to start a local chapter here and sent emails to a group of women writers she thought would be interested in such a group to gather for an organizational meeting. She was our first local chapter president when we officially got off the ground 5 years ago. Without Nancy's work and dedication, we wouldn't have our chapter or the large, thriving national organization of which it's a part. So we at Border Crimes would like to recognize Nancy for this service and give her a little token of our esteem. Nancy, would you come up?
In honor of the Chinese bed, which featured so prominently in your first whodunit, we present to you masterworks of Chinese art at the Nelson Atkins, including, you guessed it, the Chinese bed.
I wasn't going to say anything except thank you, but I didn't know they were going to do this, and I just have to say that the way I became a mystery writer was that I was at the Nelson Gallery, and I saw this Chinese bed, and I thought, what a great place to find a dead body.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce the immediate outgoing president of National Sisters in Crime, Hank Philippi Ryan. Hank is the on-air investigative reporter for Boston's NBC affiliate a television journalist since 1975. She has won 30 Emmys and 12 Edward R. Murrow Awards for her work. Her work has resulted in new laws, people sent to prison, homes removed from foreclosure, and millions of dollars in restitution. As a best-selling author of 7 mystery novels, Ryan has also won 2 Agathas, the Anthony, and the McCavity Awards for her crime fiction. Her newest thriller, The Wrong Girl, was just published by Forge in September 2013 to rave reviews and a starred review in Booklist. The Other Woman, her first Jane Ryland novel, was named to several Best of 2012 lists and won the prestigious Mary Higgins Clark Award. She is on the National Board of Directors of Mystery Writers of America, and as I said, she's now in Sisters in Crime, National Sisters in Crime. The outgoing presidents are termed goddesses. So please welcome Goddess Anne Phillips Brown.
Thank you so much. I love to hear the introductions. Can I move this? Do I need this?
You can move that.
Storm was in honor of my being from Boston. Thank you so much. You also have sun too, so you're very brave to have come through the weather for this. I promise we'll have you out of here very quickly, and it isn't going to be bad. So I'm very grateful that to be here tonight and see all of you. This is my first time in Missouri. And yesterday was my first time in Kansas. Isn't that odd? So I'm very pleased with the whole thing. And libraries, this library is unbelievable. It is gorgeous. And as libraries have been such a part of my life ever since I was a little girl. I grew up in really rural Indiana, so rural that you couldn't see another house from our house. And my sister and I used to ride our ponies to the library to get books. That's how we got our first books. And when we take turns holding the reins outside the library for each other, it was really more like this, I guess. Holding the reins outside the library for each other, where we take turns going in and fill up the saddlebags, and then come back and read up in the hayloft of the barn at our house. And that's where I read Nancy Drew and Sherlock Holmes, and that's where I really fell in love with books. So that library was the thing that got me hooked on mysteries. And as an investigative reporter, as Linda said, I've been a reporter for, 40 years now, which is crazy. When I started out as an investigative reporter, libraries were also an incredibly important part of my work as a reporter. I mean, before Google, before the internet, there was no place else to go but the research librarian to find out, all the important things that we needed. So I was on the phone with them all the time. And also I realized that workaholic me, I realized that in Boston, if I was working late and the libraries were closed, all I had to do was call California. I would call the research librarian in California and get 3 more hours of work time. And I spent a lot of time personally in libraries looking at things on the microfiche. Do you remember the microfiche? What kind of instrument of torture is that? Yes. Who invented that? And the newspaper reader thing, looking up stuff on old newspapers, which had no index and no table of contents, and no way of looking up anything at all. And I would get so distracted, I'd be like, oh, look, a hat for 50 cents. So interesting. Look at that movie. It's completely be distracted from everything that I was doing. And so when I started writing, and I came to the library and saw my actual book in the actual library, it is so astonishing. It was such an astonishing moment to see that, my book, among all those books that I had loved growing up and loved as an adult. Although when I saw The Other Woman in the library, I realized that through one of those quirks of publishing, this book says, Hank Phillippe Ryan, The Other Woman. So that was sort of an odd juxtaposition. And then it turned out to be the same thing with Hank Phillippe Ryan, The Wrong Girl. So, it's one of those, it reminds me, the juxtaposition of books, and the name and title reminds me of a story that we did a couple of, 5 or so years ago. We decided to do an investigative story about headlights, not headlights on your car, and how they get less bright as time time goes by? Do you know this? I mean, you might have had the experience of driving in your car at night, and you think, gee, I can't see, I must be getting old, or my eyes must be getting bad, right? But we discovered in this investigation that it isn't you at all. It is that the bulbs in your headlights actually get less bright as time goes by, and then the plastic in front of it, the headlight, gets opaque, and so you literally can't see. You can't see out of your headlights. So we decided to do a big story about this. So I wrote the story and edited the story, went to the edit booth and put it together, made that little movie. And the last thing that a reporter does before a story goes on the air, you've seen this, is they go down to the newsroom and they tape what's called the stand-up close, C-L-O-S-E, stand-up close. And the stand-up close is when you see the reporter standing in front of a big graphic that says whatever the story is about, like big fire, in case you didn't know from the flames. So I did my story, I did my big story on the headlights. And I put on my little reporter suit and a bunch of makeup and comb my hair. And I came down to the newsroom to tape my stand-up close. And it said, you know what I'm supposed to say, like, as a result of our story, 75 auto repair dealers have decided to give free headlight checkups for, you've heard of those. So I go down to the newsroom and I look around, and I stand in front of my graphic and I turn around, and the graphic behind me says, dangerously dim. So I was supposed to stand in front of it. It reminds me of Hey Philippi Ryan, the other one. I had to stand in front of a headlight that said dangerously dim. So I went into the news director and I said, I can't look at that. I can't stand in front of a graphic that says dangerously dim. Are you kidding me? And he burst out laughing, like you did. And then he goes, yeah, we really don't have time. So I had to stand in front of dangerously dim. And the only thing that I've ever seen that was worse than that, and you live in Kansas City or wherever, in Kansas or Missouri, so you won't tell, is that we had a gorgeous anchor woman at Channel 7 who had to stand in front of a graphic that said, botched plastic surgery. So this is another way, fun with news. It's a new way of watching the news. As Linda said, I've been a television reporter for 40 years. 40 years. I have wired myself with hidden cameras. I have confronted corrupt politicians. I've chased down criminals. I've gone undercover and in disguise. Our stories have changed laws and changed lives. We've gotten the 911 system fixed. We've gotten firehouses, got $5 billion of new equipment. We changed the jury selection system in Massachusetts, gotten homes out of foreclosure. It's been amazing. It's been fabulous. I'm still on the air in Boston. And one of the wonderful things about being a television reporter, an investigative reporter like I am, is that life is different every day. I go to work every day and I have no idea what's going to happen. And that is always marvelous. That is always a joy. But the thing was, I never planned to, as life sometimes doesn't turn out the way we plan, I never planned to be a reporter. When I got out of college, I decided that what I wanted to do was change the world a little bit, make a difference, do something that would leave a mark, have people remember me in some way. So with the naivete of someone who was 20, my career choice at that time was to go into politics because you can change the world that way. So I worked in many political campaigns in Indianapolis, my hometown, as a political campaign staffer. Sadly, none of the candidates I ever worked for actually won. And this is one of those moments when the universe is potentially saying to you, find another career. And which I realized that perhaps being a political campaign staffer was not how the universe was supposed to line up for me. So, I have kind of an abiding philosophy that when something bad happens to you, it means that something good is about to happen as a result. You just didn't know it. I mean, how many times have you been disappointed or unhappy or upset or didn't get what you hoped for? And then soon after, something great that you hadn't predicted happens only as a result of the bad thing happening. It's a way of looking at the world with the glass half full. When something bad happens, it means, oh boy, I am due for something good. And that is exactly how I got my first job in broadcasting. I had worked for a guy who was running for governor of Indiana, And we lost, we tanked, it was awful. And at the end of the election night, he was out of a job, and so was I. I was completely unemployed and skillless, as my parents would be the first to tell you, as a Shakespeare major, unemployable, who would want that? So I went to the biggest radio station in Indianapolis and applied for a job opening there. They had a job opening there for a radio reporter. So I went in and applied. I said, I'm here to apply for the job as a radio reporter. So this news director says to me, okay. Have you ever been a reporter? I'm like, no. Have you ever written a news story? Have you ever done an interview? Have you ever written a news article? No. Have you ever been on the radio? No. Okay, did you go to journalism school? No. Did you work for the school paper? Were you on the yearbook? When you were a little kid, did you hand out stuff in your neighborhood? I got nothing. I said no. I said no. And I really saw my career that I had decided I wanted just sort of going down the drain. So I said to this news director, no, I don't really have any experience like that. But I grew up here in Indianapolis, I said, and I know where all the streets are. Because that's good for a reporter, and you kind of have to go with what you've got. And then I said, and your license is up for renewal at the FCC right now, and you don't have any women working here. And I just smiled. And the next day I had my first job in broadcasting. Now, I'll tell you this, I love to tell journalism classes this because two reasons. One is just no question about that. But you can't keep your job just because you're a woman. So we had to work doubly and triply hard in order to make that work. But back in the day, we never thought, now there are 900 channels. Back in the day, we never thought that our lives would be like this. So I'm very proud to be part of that history. But really, from the moment I read my first Nancy Drew book up in that hayloft, or my first Sherlock Holmes novella, I knew that I wanted to be a mystery author. I fell in love with the mystery. I fell in love with the architecture. You read Sherlock Holmes when you were a kid, right? And you read Nancy Drew when you were growing up, of course. The clue in the old clock and the clue in the diary, which I thought was clue in the dairy. I remember for like the whole book, and I'm thinking, I was 13. I was thinking, shouldn't there be cows? I'm just, reading this whole book, waiting for the cows. But I figured that out eventually. And then I went through, then all the wonderful British women authors, Ngaio Marsh and Josephine Tey, Marjorie Allingham. I just devoured all of those books. Agatha Christie, And I think that's where my love of storytelling was born, and my love of suspense was born. And when my first book won the Agatha for Best First Mystery, you just think, wow, that little girl in the hayloft reading Agatha Christie, 50 years later, wins this award, named for her. It just shows you how often the world works in mysterious ways. And I really think that's where my passion for suspense was born, and my passion for storytelling was born. But my life turned out a different way. As you know, I became a television reporter, a journalist. And you would think that writing for television, doing investigative reporting, and writing crime fiction would be very different things. And one of the joys of my life, one of the wonderful things that I've discovered, though, is that that's wrong. That's wrong. That writing crime fiction and being an investigative reporter are incredibly similar. Because really, the essence of each thing, the essence of both things, is telling a great story. That's all there is. That's all there is. The highest accolade to a reporter is that's a hell of a story. Hell of a story. The story. And it's the same thing with writing crime fiction. It's all about a good story, a great story, with a compelling problem, with characters you love, where the good guys win and the bad guys get what's coming to them. You're tracking down clues and follow the leads, and in the end, you want to change the world a little bit. You want to get some justice. And whether I'm making stuff up in writing crime fiction or telling absolutely the truth of what I see and hear in writing investigative reporting, it's the same thing. It's still all about the good story. I want you never to think about getting up and changing the channel. I want you never to pull out that clicker when you're watching my television stories. And I want you not to be able to put the books down. I want you to say to yourself, one more chapter, just one more chapter. And that is all about telling a good story. And that's one of the two things that links crime fiction writing and investigative reporting. And the other thing that links crime fiction writing and investigative reporting is secrets. Secrets. Every one of those Emmys that I won represents a secret that someone didn't want you to know. That's all that is. Every one of those Emmys represents a secret that someone didn't want me to tell you. And also represents a secret that someone called me and told me or emailed and said to me, hey, people should know this. You should tell this. And that is another thing that links crime fiction and investigative reporting. Secrets. Who has a secret? Who knows the secret? Who's going to tell the secret? And what will happen if that secret gets told? That's the key to investigative reporting. And it's also the key to the wrong girl. It's the key to crime fiction. And one of the amazing things about having a dual career as an investigative reporter and a crime fiction author is that sometimes one of those phone calls that I get, one of those emails that I get, turns out to be not a story for television, but with the right, tweaking and polishing and imagination and adrenaline, a little thought, and a little excitement, can turn into being the gem, the jewel that begins a wonderful thriller. And I think that's exactly what happened with The Wrong Girl. Now let me just quickly tell you, here's the scoop on what happened with The Wrong Girl. A woman called me and said, I have a great story idea for you. So I said, okay, tell me the story. And she says, well, my cousin got a call a couple of days ago from an adoption agency. This girl had been given up for adoption as an infant, as a baby. And 25 years later, she got a call from the adoption agency saying, we found your birth mother. Would you like to meet her? So she says, so my cousin says, yes, of course I want to meet my birth mother. So they went up to New Hampshire and met at a tea shop. They had tea, and they liked each other very much. But they realized pretty quickly that they were not mother and daughter. This was not a match. They were not a match. So this woman says to me on the phone, Hank, can you believe it? They sent that woman the wrong girl. I'm like, oh, thank you. I thought, my book. My first thought, actually, my second thought was, what am I going to wear to the Emmys? Because if this is as good story as I think it might be, this is going to be another Emmy for me. So, I'm an investigative reporter, so I put the phone on my shoulder, and I'm like, okay, tell me everything. So here's the story. I said to her, what happened, who did this? Because I'm thinking, if an adoption agency is reuniting birth parents with the wrong children, that is terrible. If this happened to her, could it have happened to anyone else? What if this is happening on a bigger scale? That is a scandal. That is an unbelievable scandal. So here's the story that she told me. And this is true. I'm going to change their names, though, so in case you know some. I'm going to change their names. This is true. Turns out, she says, that 25 years ago, two cousins, Mary Williams and Marie Williams, unbeknownst to each other, these cousins gave birth on the same day to infant girls. And unbeknownst to each other, on the same day, they gave these infant girls up for adoption to the same adoption agency. I know. 25 years later, Marie Williams is looking for her birth daughter, and the daughter of Mary Williams is looking for her birth mother. So the adoption agency decides, damn it, that must be a match. That must be a match. And not that computers get everything right, but this is back in the day when they had, multi-part carbon paper, carbon paper, right? Multi-part carbon paper forms, and they were all fuzzy. And so nobody was doing anything that was even malicious or even wrong. Someone just made a clerical error. So as a television story, that wasn't a very good television. It's a good feature and it's interesting, but it's not an investigative story. And because it's a clerical error like that, with those matching names, it isn't an investigative story, and it wouldn't have happened to anyone else. But as the germ of a thriller, I knew that I had something there. Now, you're crime fiction readers, right? So if you read a book, and in the, on page 343 of a 346-page book, if I said, so, turns out that two cousins who didn't know each other on the same day, right? You would just be thinking, oh, please, that could never happen. It did happen, but it's not good enough. It's too coincidental. It's too true to be fiction, right? So I had to think of something else. I could see the germ of a fabulous story. What if an adoption agency really was reuniting birth parents with the wrong children? Or even better, for a suspense thriller, what if maybe they were reuniting birth parents with the wrong children? How would you know that? What could possibly happen? What would be the reason? What would be the motivation? What would be the good of doing that? Would it be because somebody wanted power, because somebody wanted money, because somebody wanted revenge, because somebody wanted manipulation? There are all kinds of reasons that could happen. And I had to figure out for my book, which I knew would be called The Wrong Girl, I had to figure out for The Wrong Girl what would really be going on. Because the question would be, would people recognize their own families? What if you didn't know the truth about your own families? What if someone lied to you about your past? What if someone made up a history and they said, this is who you are? Would you believe them? This is something that is so primal to us. If somebody said, here's the answer to every question you've always been asking, would you believe them? And what if that person were lying to you? And that turned out to be the fictional Wrong Girl. Now let me tell you quickly, The Wrong Girl is the second Jane Ryland adventure. But like Sue Grafton, exactly like Sue Grafton, you can read these books in any order. You could read L, and then you could read B of Sue Grafton. You could read The Wrong Girl first, and then The Other Woman. They're fast-paced thrillers. They take place in Boston and New England. There's no graphic sex. There's no graphic violence. The Other Woman won the Mary Higgins Clark Award, so you know what you're getting with that. The Other Woman, some people call The Good Wife meets Law and Order. I know. I got goosebumps when I had that idea, too. And that was nominated for the Anthony, Agatha, Daphne, Seamus, and Macavity, every major mystery award, and won the Mary Higgins Clark Award last year. And this one is brand new. It's been on the Boston Globe bestseller list for 2 weeks now, and was just nominated for Best Suspense Thriller of 2013 by Atlantic Times Book Review. So I'm very happy about that. They're airplane books. This is not literary fiction. They're just flat-out entertainment. So The Wrong Girl stars Jane Ryland. She's a Boston television reporter who's been fired from her job. That's no spoiler, it happens on like page 2 of The Other Woman. So she's been fired from her job as a reporter because she's protected a source. She will not reveal the name of the source. Her station loses a $1 million lawsuit and Jane gets fired. Jane gets thrown under the bus. So she gets a job, a low-paying job at a local newspaper, and she's trying to redeem herself. She's on the hunt for the story that will save her career. So she begins to suspect that an adoption agency might be reuniting birth parents with the wrong children, and she's on that trail. And she's asking herself the same questions that I asked myself when I got the call from the person. What if you began to fear that you weren't living with your real birth parents? What if somebody introduced you to your parents and they weren't really your parents? What if you didn't know the truth about your own family? And like The Other Woman, The Wrong, they're too young to talk. So Jake wonders, who killed this young foster mother? What did the kids see, and what can he do with them since they can't talk? And the other mystery for Jake is, in the back bedroom of the foster mother's apartment is an empty crib. Where is the baby that should be in that crib? Is it a child who's on the way? Or is it a child who was kidnapped? Where is that baby? So Jane is on the trail of an adoption agency that may be reuniting birth parents with the wrong children. Jake is on the trail of a missing infant and the murder of a foster mother. As in all my books, those two plots come together in the end and make a difference to each other. And now you're a crime fiction writer and reader, so you're saying, oh, adoption agency, foster mother, missing baby, come on, I can figure that out. Well, no, I promise you. I promise you can't. I don't work with an outline, so I didn't know what was going to happen in the end of this book, and I didn't know how the stories were going to come together. The only way I could solve the mystery was to sit at my computer and solve it myself. And when people say, wow, the end of The Wrong Girl, you really surprised me. I didn't think that was going to happen. I'm like, yeah, me either. Talk about a surprise ending. I surprised myself. But finally about the books, a good thriller, a good piece of crime fiction has to be about more than whodunit, or even more than why done it. It has to be about something. It has to take you into a world that you've never been to before and make you think about, just like I was saying before, it has to change the world for you a little bit. It has to make a difference in your life. And that's what this book does about adoption and about foster care. Anybody who's navigated the really emotional, difficult waters of foster care and adoption will connect with this book. It's not disturbing to them, it's just eye-opening to them. I thought about writing this book, I thought, with the flutter of a butterfly wing, we're a Kennedy or we're in foster care. How does that happen? How do the dominoes fall? And what happens to the people who were involved? So that's what The Wrong Girl is about. It's also about murder and malevolency and suspense and deception and what happens when a person preys on our primal need to have a family and to know who our family is, and that is The Wrong Girl. I mean, it's absolutely, as an investigative reporter, to finally get to make stuff up was really pretty fabulous. And I wondered if my brain would let me do that. I wondered if my imagination would work to make something out of thin air, to make a story and a world out of thin air. And it turned out to be a joy. Do you know the Stephen Sondheim musical, Sunday at the Park with George? Have you heard that or seen that? It's about the French Impressionist painter Georges Seurat, who, in this play, is painting on a blank canvas, and he realizes that he's made a hat. He's made a hat. And he sings, look, I made a hat where there never was a hat. And it's a song about the realization of our imagination and our creativity and how we as human beings can make something new out of something that never existed before. And that's how I feel every day as an author. Look, I made a hat. I made a world. I go back to my office and make hats. I make worlds that never existed before. And then I get to have you be in that world. If you say you know Jane, if you say you know Jake, then that world is fulfilled. The book isn't really fulfilled when I write it. It's only fulfilled when you read it, when we share that world. I'm the poster child for following your dreams at midlife. I didn't start writing crime fiction until I was 55. I just turned 64. At a time when people would say, you're fine, you've had this great career, just count your blessings. But you think about, that little girl in the hayloft reading mysteries. I always wanted to do that. So if you take nothing from tonight, except my voice. If you take nothing from tonight, except my book, I want you to remember that I am the proof that no matter what it is that you want to do, if you want to write that book or write that book of poetry or learn Italian or start a new business or whatever it is that you want to do, please, I don't want you to wake up one morning and say, I regret I didn't do that. I could have done that. No matter who you are or where you are in life, if there's a dream that you have, you must do it. Let me wrap up by saying, do you know the folk singer Judy Collins? You know Judy Collins, the folk singer. My husband, I'm glad you're nodding because my husband and I went to hear Judy Collins at Sanders Theater at Harvard a couple of months ago. And I told my 30-year-old producer, Jonathan and I are going to go hear Judy Collins. And Mary says, oh, that kind of voice like I have no idea what you're talking about. So I said, You know, Judy Collins, the folk singer, she sang both sides now, she's fabulous. I said I couldn't have gotten through college without listening to her records. And Mary says, records? No, she didn't. She didn't. It would have been fun. It would have been fun, but she didn't like that. Anyway, Judy, I know, and you're thinking, why are you telling me this? Here's why. Judy Collins said that when she was a girl growing up, that her parents had told her that they had planned that she would be a concert pianist. That's what her career goal was. She took lessons, she studied. Her parents wanted her to be a concert pianist, and that was how her life was going to be. And she told us that she knew from the moment she knew anything that she wanted to be. She didn't want to be a concert pianist. She wanted to be a folk singer. She wanted to be a folk singer. And she said she knew that from the moment she knew anything. And she told us that finally, at age 19, she said, I packed my bags and I moved to New York to be a folk singer. She said, I packed my bags and I moved to New York to be a folk singer, and I took all my songs with me. And then she said, of course, I hadn't written any of them yet. I hadn't written any of them yet. But she knew she had them. She knew she had those songs. And I think we all have songs. We all have songs. We just might not have written any of them yet. And I'm the person who's here tonight to tell you, please write your songs. We all want to hear them. When I finished writing my first book, Primetime, I called my husband into the room and I said, sweetheart, watch this. And I typed the end. And I burst into tears. I burst into tears because I knew no matter what happened after that, I had followed my dreams. That little girl in the hayloft had done what she'd always wanted to do. But of course, I shouldn't have cried when I typed the end, because it wasn't the end at all. It was the beginning, right, of this wonderful new second half of my life. And I'm so pleased that you invited me here tonight to share that with all of you. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to say two things. One, I'm required by my agent to say this. A signed book makes a great gift. But Mysteryscapes is selling books. I would be delighted to sign books for you. Or as a library.
Every little piece comes together in the end.
Oh my goodness, how do I make sure that every little piece comes together in the end? That is such a good question, and it is such an important question. Because how many times have you read a book and you're at the end and you go, well, what happened to the dog? You know, where was that guy? I have, as I write, I don't have an outline, but I do have sticky notes. And every time I come to a place, an end that has to be tied up, I write that on the sticky note. You know, the baby, who called 911, you know, what happened to the photographer. And I put that sticky note on my monitor. So as the book progresses, more sticky notes start appearing. And then as it starts to wind up, and as I start to solve the mystery for myself, the sticky notes I take them down. I save them, but I take them down. And there's always the moment in every novel when the last sticky note comes down. You know, when the last end gets tied up. It's interesting to think about from the other end also. Not how the ends get tied up answer, but how do the ends get in there in the first place? You know what I mean? And the best answer I've ever heard about from this, and this is how Lee Child told me he does it, which is sort of how I do it too. He likens it to one of those cooking shows, where at the beginning of the show, they give you a refrigerator full of stuff, you know, cotton candy and peanuts and feta cheese and pine nuts and beer. And at the end, you have to make something out of that. You have to make a dish from that. And that's what I do. So he says at every book, in the first couple hundred pages, in the first 100 pages of the book, I'm filling up my refrigerator with stuff. And then in the second half of the book, I use this stuff. And that's what I do too. So things happen, people say things, people have attitudes, people have, you know, there are things people do and things people have and things people use. And I think, wonder why that's here. And then later I have to and then later I have to figure that out. So it's a puzzle. And in the end, I figure it out as the characters figure it out.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
What happened after you typed the end to the point of having your book in this way?
Oh my goodness, what happened after I typed the end? A lot. I mean, that was a big process of finding an agent, of selling the book. An interesting quick note about that is that After I got an agent, the agent who finally took, I mean, I sent out cold query letters. There was nothing that happened, there was no secret, there was no, because I was on TV, there was nothing that made it easy. It was very difficult, and I came home, this was back in the day, when you had to send in your queries on paper. So I would come home from work every day to see those brown stamped self-addressed envelopes in the mailbox. And everyone that, every stamped self-addressed envelope was no, that was a rejection. And I would say, I'd look at the mailbox as we drove up the driveway and say, oh. And finally I said to my husband, the main character's name is Charlotte McNally. Charlotte's gonna die. Nobody's ever gonna meet her. And Jonathan says, Charlotte is not gonna die. Your book is gonna sell. How do you know? You don't know. So I whined my way through a couple of months like that. And finally, an agent loved it. And when someone started saying yes, when one person said yes, a whole lot of people said yes for some reason. It must be just the universe thought it was time. My agent who took me said that she got 20,000 submissions the year she took me, and she accepted 6 clients. That's how crazy that is. And when the book sold to Mira and the Mira editor said to me, your book is too light and fluffy, it's too chick-lit. You need to rewrite this book as more textured, in-depth women's fiction. Can you do that? So I said, yes, of course I can. Of course I can. Because I'm a reporter, I can make it funnier or more investigative, or I can make it a poem, I can make it be longer or shorter or different. I'm a writer. So I rewrote the entire book with the same plot, but with a different sensibility, and then it sold. So we each have our own path. Not many paths are easy, and mine was not easy either, but every obstacle along the way is something I embrace now, because I really learned from that. Yes?
My question is kind of twofold. With the jobs you have, how do you find the time to really get into the groove of writing? And then when you are writing, you say you don't use an outline or anything. Do you ever find yourself really getting into it and all of a sudden you go, wow, I've gone off on too many tangents, and kind of pull back?
There's 2 questions. One is how I manage my time. How I manage my time is I work all the time. I work all the time. So my husband is a criminal defense attorney. Did anybody read Defending Jacob? Do you know the book Defending Jacob? And you know the lawyer Jonathan Klein who defends Jacob in Defending Jacob? That's my husband. That character is based on my husband. He defended a young man named John Ogden in the same kind of circumstance, and the book was based on him. So when you read that, you'll recognize Jonathan. Anyway, Jonathan and I ride to work together in the morning. I read the newspaper out loud to him in the car. And my goal is to make up stuff and pretend it's in the newspaper and see if he'll figure out that I'm making stuff up. Anyway, so we work from 9 till 6, then we go home. I write from maybe 7 till 10 every night, and then we have dinner. I write on the weekends. I use all my vacation days to write. When I'm at Channel 7 working on my Channel 7 stuff, I work on I'm there focusing on that. I don't multitask. I just do the thing I'm supposed to do, and then I do the next thing. And I just have faith that the next day they'll also be good. And I have faith that, I was on a plane with someone who said, and he asked me what I did, and I told him, and I asked him what he did, and he said, I do emergent solution design. So I said, emergent solution design, what is that? And he said, when you write your novels, do you know what the end is going to be? And I said, I don't. And he said, do you have faith that you'll be able to figure it out, that you'll be able to come up with a solution? And I said, yeah, I completely do. And he says, the solution emerges. And I said, yeah. And he said, that's emergent solution design. And he says he teaches people how to think that way, and, which is interesting. Wow. And he says that, yeah. And he said, and not everybody can do it, which I thought was really kind of interesting. So I have faith that I'll be able to figure it out no matter what I do. Any last question? Anybody else? I am so grateful that you came tonight for braving the weather, braving everything. Thank you. You're marvelous to come. Find me on Facebook, Hank Philippi Ryan author page. Please take my business card if there's anything I can ever do for you or anything that you ever need. I'd be thrilled. I hope to come back here next fall for my new book, Truth Be Told. which is Hank Phillippe Ryan, Truth Be Told. Which is about a mortgage banker who decides that banks have been bailed out long enough and it's time for the people to be bailed out. So she manipulates people's mortgage records to keep their homes out of foreclosure. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Happy to have you.
Don't forget, Mr. Skate people out there, Hank will be signing books, and then at the table right around the corner, a couple of our members will be out there if you're interested in Sisters in Crime, which is a wonderful, fabulous, resourceful organization for writers and readers of this music. Thank you for coming.